Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 8th annual Blackstone Valley Education Foundation Business and Education Forum. I'm Erica Baum, the Executive Director. We are recording today's event, so I encourage you to participate during our question and answer sessions, as well as our roundtable discussions. For those who have joined us in past years, if you're anything like me, right about now, you may be missing out on the informal networking that we're usually able to participate in, perhaps while enjoying a bacon-wrapped scallop or a beef skewer from the many trays that are kind of passed around. I assure you, this has become a BVEF tradition, and we will return to this next year. And this afternoon, you will have the opportunity to do that important networking that I know you all look forward to. But for today, we're going to focus on project-based learning. As our theme suggests, we're going to learn how to utilize project-based learning to enhance workforce readiness. Before we go any further, though, I'd like to thank our major BVEF financial supporters: Blackstone Valley Chamber of Commerce, Lampen Corporation, Unibank, and the Osterman Family Foundation all support our BVEF school grants program. All of our member school districts have an annual opportunity to apply to any one of 4 grants that support initiatives that strengthen career readiness and innovative programs that connect the communities to our schools. The Osterman Family Foundation also helps by supporting Art in the Valley. This is a popular art show displaying artwork from our students in grades K through 8, as well as teachers at those levels. Finally, our other major financial supporter is our new partnership with MIFA. Thanks to this newly developed partnership, we're able to provide virtual programming surrounding college financing exclusively for our educators, our students, and their families. Connecting Activities is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education initiative that supports college and career readiness for all students. The CA line item in the budget establishes public-private partnerships through workforce boards. In our case, it's the Mass Hire Central Region Workforce Board, to connect schools and businesses and provide learning experiences that support both their academic and their employability skills. I also want to thank our major forum sponsors this year. Dell Technologies. Dell employees have been directly involved with our STEM-focused student programming. These professionals interact with our students, they listen to our students' ideas, and they share their knowledge and expertise with both our students and our teachers. Our other major sponsor, Flexible Fundamentals. Located in Whitensville, Flexible Fundamentals is a community supporter of the Blackstone Valley. They're dedicated to facilitating teaching social and emotional intelligence. This is always a need, but especially now as we move forward from our pandemic. I'd like to thank each of our virtual roundtable sponsors. This is quite a list. It's truly these partnerships that we continue to build and develop that helps our organization move forward. So thank you. Also, we're always grateful for the continuous support that we receive from our legislators. This year, many legislators have joined us for our programming. Earlier this fall, we had several speak directly with our students during our Careers in STEM webinar series. And more recently, during our regional job fair, we had, again, representatives, legislators come and speak and give tips and advice to our students. So we thank you. We know your time is valuable, Thank you to all who are with us today, and we look forward to your contributions during our roundtable discussions. This year has been challenging and a bit different for all of us. So at BVEF, we wanted to take a minute to thank and recognize a handful of individuals between now and the end of our program today for their contributions to kind of help make BVEF what it is. I'd like to start out by recognizing Steve DeVito. He's the Dean of Students and the Alternative Learning Coordinator at Milford High School. He also sits on our BVEF College and Career Readiness Committee. Steve, thank you for your genuine desire to support student learning and growth in all areas. This is displayed by your consistent initiative and sense of team. So thank you. And also Lisa Casso. Lisa is a marketing event specialist at Lenza Americas located in Uxbridge. Lisa's enthusiasm to have Lenza participate in BVEF program exemplifies the company's commitment to community support. So thank you, Lisa. At this time, I would like to welcome our BVEF Board President, Anthony Steele, to share a few words with us today. Anthony?
Thank you, Erica, and welcome everyone. As the president, I'd like to certainly give you a warm welcome on behalf of the board and of course our staff at the Ed Foundation. Particularly, I'd like to start by thanking our legislators for partnering with us to enhance both the economic and educational development initiatives. They've helped us a lot with grants, and of course their advocacy is always there for us. They're always there and reliable, and we appreciate everything that you do. I'd also like to thank our business and industry partners. Numerous tours, guest lectures, professional development for our students and our teachers, contributing to our job fairs, and it goes on and on. Very grateful for all of our industry partners that we have, many here today with us, joining us. And of course, you can see up on the screen here our member school districts. I certainly like to thank all of our educators in our member districts for their dedication and their focus on career awareness, soft skill attainment, career pathways, steering our kids towards internships and job opportunities. Certainly a noble mission that they're all very much a part of. Really, what we've done together as a foundation with all of you is a great service for the children that we serve, the economic vitality of our region, and overall, when you add in Art in the Valley and some of the other projects that we do with the Leadership Academy and things like that, together we've made a considerable contribution to the positive development and enrichment of our community as a whole. The Ed Foundation has had a pretty remarkable year despite the pandemic. Of course, we all took a step back in the COVID-19 restrictions. We lost a lot of our face-to-face interactions and our traditional events, or I'll say our events as we traditionally held them. But the foundation nonetheless had a great year. We greatly enhanced our online presence and the functionality of our website grew tenfold. Like you, we became very skilled at virtual meetings, virtual space, and collaborating online and things like that. Our staff, particularly Erica Baum, Holly McNeil, and Jocelyn Young, were incredibly creative this year to persevere through all of those restrictions, make a lot of these events still possible. And certainly with your help, we all were able to still keep these things going, whether they be in the virtual setting or in a completely different format. So when you take this year in sum, we still made incredible advancements. Very proud of everything that the foundation's been able to accomplish with your partnership. And when you look at that in the forecast for next year, you take the enhanced abilities that we have now with the virtual meeting space, the new website and things like that. And as we get back to those face-to-face activities, the tours, the visits, the site visits, the professional development gatherings, job fairs, and all of those things. It looks like an incredibly bright future for the foundation and the mission that we all share. So again, just wanted to thank all of you for your support, no matter what part you play in it. It's been certainly a fantastic ride for BVEF and the number of years that I've served. And we're all very grateful for your contribution. And I really hope you enjoy your day at Forum today. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Anthony. So despite the pandemic, thanks to our member school districts and our business partners, I can honestly say and echo Anthony's words that the health and momentum of BVEF is strong. This year, we've been able to adapt and continue to serve you with the high quality program you deserve. Our traditional programs like the Blackstone Valley Youth Leadership Academy and Art in the Valley, they've been very successful, with our most recent cohort of freshman and sophomore high school students graduating from our Leadership Academy just this past week with a ceremony held at Asa Waters Mansions. This year, the virtual art gallery is still on our website. And yes, as Anthony mentioned, our website has grown, it's interactive. I give a lot of that credit to Jocelyn Young. She's done an amazing job with that. But if you haven't had a chance to visit our website and the art from our K-8 students and teachers, I encourage you to do so. It's still up there. This year, we've also offered virtual sessions focused on careers in STEM for our middle school students and teachers in collaboration with Consigli Construction, Gaston Electrical, Gaudette Insurance Agency, Mop Free Insurance, Lampin Corporation, and Lenza Americas. We've piloted STEM challenges for our high school students in collaboration with both Dell Technologies and Waters Corporation. We've had college financing webinars with our new partner, MIFA, which I had mentioned, and also professional development opportunities for our teachers, including a session that focused on internships and capstones with Carrie Occasion, who's the career development lead for DESE, and also another session on emotional resiliency, very timely, for our elementary and middle school teachers. And that was in collaboration with BrainFit Academy. We also had our first ever regional job fair and career readiness symposium in collaboration with Mass Hire and Worcester Public Schools. In addition to the over 80 employer booths that were there, we also, in our BVEF education room, offered 4 hours of live interviews and pre-recorded content with a wide variety of career professionals offering advice and insights and education to our students regarding the skills needed to be successful in the workforce. Just this year alone, we have reached over 1,000 students and teachers. We have served over 1,000, and we've made over 150 connections with our educators and our business professionals. This is only possible because of each of you and your contributions and the partnerships that we have. So thank you. Thank you also, these people, the BVEF staff. It's truly a team effort with a lot of collaboration and a lot of communication, especially this year, in order to be so successful. So thank you to Holly McNeil, our communications and event coordinator, Jocelyn Young, our program and grant coordinator, Ashley McClure is our Art in the Valley coordinator, and Megan Patenti, who is our Leadership Academy coordinator. Thank you all. So over the past several years, we've discussed and revisited the importance of internships, the importance of work-based experiences for our students. And every time we discuss these topics, we have 2 main challenges that arise. How the current school day schedule for many of our traditional schools doesn't give students the time that's required for an internship that will truly result in a meaningful learning experience for those students. while also being mutually beneficial to the company involved. After all, if you're a business leader, how beneficial is it to you to know that you could have an intern from, say, 9:03 a.m. until 10:54 a.m.? The second challenge surrounds soft skills. For those who have joined us for Forum in past years, you know all too well that no matter what the topic, no matter what the theme, the conversation always circles back to soft skills, to the importance of making sure that our students are able to think critically, collaborate, problem solve, work as a team before they enter the workforce. And we know that this list could continue. So that brings us to our focus today, project-based learning. We're going to answer these questions together. First, what is it? And secondly, how can it benefit me? How can it benefit you if you're an educator, or you if you're a business leader, or a member of a community organization? And once we have an answer to these questions, a more clear understanding, then we can move on to the most important piece. And that is, together as educators and business leaders, how can we work together to devise ways to develop shared opportunities to increase these authentic learning experiences for our students? And this is what we're going to do during our roundtable discussions this afternoon. But right now, we are going to have some help answering these questions. We have two keynote speakers this afternoon. I will share that after both keynotes are done, we will have a brief Q&A. So I will encourage you to go ahead and type any questions that you may have as you're listening into the chat. But first, I'd like to introduce you to Joe Krajcik. Joe serves as director of the Create for STEM Institute and is the Lampin Phillips Professor of Science Education at Michigan State University. His work focuses in improving the teaching and learning of science, kindergarten through college, by engaging in innovation and research. Throughout his career, Joe has focused on working with science teachers to design and test learning environments to reform science teaching practices and to research student learning and engagement in project-based learning environments. Joe served as president of the National Association for Research in Science and Teaching, from which he received the Distinguished Contributions to Science Education through Research Award in 2010. He served as lead writer for developing physical science standards for the NGSS and the lead writer for the Physical Science Design Team for the framework for K-12 science education. He has authored and co-authored books, over 100 manuscripts and curriculum materials. Joe received many professional awards and recognitions for his contributions to the science education through the years. George G. Mallison Award from Michigan Science Teachers Association in 2014, Distinguished Professorship from Ewha Women's University in Seoul, South Korea in 2009, guest professorships from Beijing Normal University in Beijing, China in 2002 and 2018, and the Western Visiting Professor of Science Education from Weizmann Institute of Science, Israel in 2005. In 2020, Joe was elected to the National Academy of Education and received the prestigious McGraw Prize in Pre-K through 12 education, and in 2021, ISDDE Prize for Excellence in Educational Design. Joe received his PhD in science education from the University of Iowa in 1986. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Joe Krajcik.
Thank you, Erica, for that very nice introduction. One thing that wasn't mentioned that I should mention, as prior to getting my PhD, I actually taught for 8 years. I was a high school chemistry teacher, so it's not that I've been in the classroom. It seems like a long time ago. I continue, though, to go in the classrooms, and I really enjoy working with kids and with teachers. But thank you. You actually made me hungry. I have to tell you this. When you talked about You miss these things and you talk about the scallops and stuff. I go, oh yeah, I remember those things at these gatherings. So hopefully someday I might be able to share one with you. So today I'm going to talk about promoting deep and usable knowledge of STEM through project-based learning. And as Erica suggested, please, if you have any questions, please place them in the chat. So what will we do today? I'm going to discuss what is project-based learning. I'm going to present, trying to answer one of her questions. What does it do for you? I'm going to present the results of a study that make use of PBL features. And then, as Erica said, we'll have time for some discussion at the end. But let me start by saying that to all of you that science is for all students. And I think this last 15 months has really shown us this. We're starting to finally get out of this pandemic that we're in, but it really shows you the need for people to understand very complex ideas. And unless we do a really good job of this in our teaching, we're never going to have the society that we would like. So science and engineering and technology permeate modern life, and it's essential not only for society, but also for individual. It drives our workplace, but it also drives the public good because it's critical for people to make important public policy decisions, make good decision making. And also, if they need to learn more, and we know in our lifetimes, if you think about your own lifetime, I think about my lifetime, the number of changes that have occurred and the amount that we had to learn. So it's knowing science is just critical because how it permeates our world. Of course, one of the challenges we face is how do we really develop wonderful learning environments that can really foster engagement and innovation and critical thinking. None of us, if we're a classroom teacher, if we're an administrator, want this image on the left side that you're looking at. We'd rather have this image on the right side where the kids are very engaged. We don't like looking up and seeing kids sleeping. We like to see kids actively involved in the process of learning and really learning some deep ideas that they can learn as they continue in their life. So my approach to teaching and learning since I was a classroom teacher is to really focus on learning science by doing science. That's basically the essence of project-based learning. Because when you're learning science by doing science, you're making sense of phenomena, you make informed decisions, you solve problems, and you use your knowledge. That's our goal, or my goal. And I'm sure you share that goal with me, because we know to have really good workers, it's not like it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. People really have to use their knowledge. They have to be able to think on the spot. They have to be able to solve problems. They have to make decisions. And so this is where we want to try to get kids. And how do we do that? So our challenge, and I sometimes use the word our challenge because I work with a lot of wonderful people. So I wish I could say everything I'm going to say today is just because of me, but I work with some wonderful people like my current good colleague, Barbara Snyder. So I often refer to our challenge, but it's also our challenge as a larger learning community. And of course, what I want to do is really to build learning environments, classroom settings that will allow all students to develop deep, integrated, and usable knowledge of science. And I use the term usable on purpose. It's not just knowing, it's actually being able to make use of your ideas, apply your ideas in new situations. Of course, also critical is actually sustaining motivation to learn science. Science is not an easy subject matter. It really takes a lot of persistence, and people sometimes give up. And we can't have that happen. We have to have people stick to really trying to figure out these challenging problems that we face. Part of that is also really learning how to do science and do engineering and develop the competencies to do that. So the notion is to be able to solve problems, make decisions, and think innovatively. Of course, one of the things we really know nowadays through research is just learning content is critical. You have to know the big ideas. How do you get there? How do you learn the big ideas of science? How do you learn big ideas like design processes in the real world? How do you go about doing that? And so we know nowadays that you just can't learn the content. It has to be implied in the process of actually doing it together. That's where the notion of project-based learning comes in, because it's while you're doing that you actually learn. So the forming usable knowledge that I can use throughout my life and further learn more, requires that I use the big ideas of science. They're nowadays called disciplinary core ideas and cross concepts, along with the practices of science. It's those working together that really allow children to be able to use their knowledge and do the problem solving and the decision making that we really want to see all children be able to do. You might say I have this rope over here on the side, and I actually really like this analogy. I've used it now since I believe 2012. And the reason why I like it is it shows all the dimensions of scientific knowledge, the scientific practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. All three of them are important, but not one of them stands on their own. All of them work together to actually allow us to solve problems, explain phenomena, and think innovatively. We have to both, in our learning them and using them, they all work together. That's what scientists do in the laboratory. So that takes us to the root of my work, which is the principles of project-based learning. And I want to start off from the onset to notice that when I use the word project, I don't mean something at the end of a unit. To me, project-based learning is the curriculum. It is the unit. It's what we're studying throughout. And often, I hear people say, oh yeah, we're doing project-based learning. It's something tacked on at the end. That's not project-based learning. Project-based learning in my world and what I do permeates the entire classroom environment. And in that process, what kids do is they pursue solutions to meaningful questions or context or phenomena or designing problems. So there's something present to them. I like to call them driving questions that really drives the learning. And it's also focused on usable performance learning goals. So all the units that we develop, all the projects that we develop, always have important learning goals that are really anchored in what kids should know, right? Every state has some standards that are different than some other standards. But, if for those of you who are physicists or engineers or chemists, we all know that energy is a critical concept. If you're a biologist, you know that adaptation and genetics is a huge concept. All kids have to learn those ideas. And so our work focuses on kids really delving into meeting those important learning goals. And of course, one of the ways they do that is by exploring those meaningful questions, by participating in the scientific and engineering practice to figure out why is that phenomenon occurring or how can I solve that problem. But the world of work, and we also know solving anything that's difficult is never done individually. It's always done in collaboration. So getting kids to know how to collaborate together, how to work together, to use each other's ideas to solve those problems is critical. Today, technology is permeated throughout our life. Most of us can't leave home without this guy, our little cell phones, and they're powerful devices. And there's more powerful devices. We can gather information from them. We can do fast computations on them. So learning technologies where get kids to be able to visualize, collect data is just critical, but also supporting kids and providing scaffolds for kids so they can do some of this challenging work is instrumental. And the final feature of project-based learning for me, is creating artifacts, tangible products that really address the questions and problems that were brought at the beginning of the unit that really shows what kids have learned. So artifacts actually represent real workplaces. That's what people do in the work. They create stuff. They have to build stuff. They have to solve stuff. And that's what we try to do in our project-based science units. This is a little bit of a graphic that sort of shows that process, you might say, of what it is for kids that drive the figuring out process. Kids experience a phenomena that you all know are events in nature that we can observe, you can investigate them, and they can be explained. So kids experience a phenomena. I'll give you an example in a second. This raises questions that the kids ask and also that the teacher can put forth. This leads to kids engaged in using scientific practices, investigating, developing models, analyzing data, using mathematical and computational thinking. This leads to them figuring something out that they can explain. And it also leads to new questions. That's the scientific process, right? We figure something out, but there's always another question out there to go a little bit farther in our work. So one of my solutions at the high school level, what I'm gonna talk about today, is called crafting engaging science environments. And what crafting engaging science environments is all about is engaging all learners in sense making. And one of the key aspects of our work, when I've been talking a little bit about material development, it alone can't stand on its own. What it really takes is a system in order for this to work. And so in our work, there's actually 4 very important parts. There's highly developed and specified materials for teachers. I like to call them educative teacher materials because they help the teachers learn as well. Many of the practices that teachers are to be engaged in, like having kids ask questions, using questions to drive instruction, helping kids construct models, those are new practices for teachers. So we have to support the teachers as well. Then there's highly developed and specified materials for students, experiencing phenomena or problems firsthand, writing experiences, constructing models, investigations. And of course, in order to help teachers understand how to do this work, you have to provide long-term professional learning. Prior to the pandemic, our professional learning typically consisted of face-to-face meetings, but also fairly intense face-to-face meetings during the summer, followed up with day-long face-to-face meetings several times during the year, but then enhanced by video conferences, as well as those educative supports and the materials I talked about. And the last feature is creating usable, formative, I'm sorry, I have 3-dimensional there. I didn't really go into that for this talk, but think of it as usable, formative, and end of the unit assessments. And I talk about usable, formative is because kids are actually using their knowledge. And these could be constructing models, these could be developing artifacts during the project. And some of our work in the crafting engaging science environment is we conducted an efficacy study to see, do kids really learn? I mean, it's one thing to say, yeah, kids learn, but do they learn better than other kids? And that's what an efficacy study does. And my good friend Barbara Snyder, Professor Barbara Snyder from MSU, was a wonderful collaborator. As I said, you can't solve difficult problems on your own. You always need a close collaborator, and Barbara was mine. So here's some examples. These are just 2 of the examples that we created. We created materials both for high school chemistry and high school physics. And as I said, these are always driven by kids engaging in a meaningful problem or a question that they might have interested in. So one of them might be, how can I design a vehicle to be safer for a passenger during a collision? Many of those students are getting their driver's license for the first time. And of course, a high-speed crash can just be fatal. And so having them think about the factors that go in to preventing such a collision or injuries during collisions is really critical. That's the question. It starts off actually by having them see actually on video a really high impact collision, which is very not nice to look at, but it really gets them to see that, what can I do? As I said, all our work is really focused on important learning goals. And you can see here on the right, these are very challenging learning goals. Apply scientific and engineering ideas to design, evaluate, and refine a device that minimizes the force on a microscopic objects during collision. That's a tough learning goal for high school kids to get to move to move towards, but that's what we're driving them to do. At the high school chemistry level, here's one of the questions we have. When I'm sitting by a pool, why do I feel colder when I'm wet than when I'm dried? Now, it seems almost like a kind of a simple question, but actually it's very complex because it really has to do with the intermolecular forces and energy, right? It has to do both with intermolecular forces, and that in order for molecules to evaporate, energy has to be transferred into the system, and it comes from your skin, and so you're colder. So it's a very complex, while it seems simple, it's extremely complex. You can again look at the learning goals here, and we'll look at the second one here. Develop and use models to illustrate that energy at the macroscopic scale can be accounted for as combination of energy associated with motion of particles and energy with the relative position of particles. An extremely challenging learning goal that definitely has to be developed across time. And that's why projects work so nicely, because they tend to be more long-term. So I'm going to quickly go through this because I want to get to the punchline here. So we have a very intense system to get the results that we have. And it moves always from the principles, these learning principles that are tied up in project-based learning, that we have the systems approach, we have materials for teachers and students and assessments. These provide engagement, and of course, we hope to see outcomes that promote both academic and emotional learning. And the question is, do we? So when you take kids and you put them in project-based learning environments, and again, it has all these components. There was intense professional learning as well as intense development of materials that were tested beforehand, of course. Do you really see results that you can be impressed with? So we conducted a randomized control treatment in which we had kids that were randomly placed and teachers randomly placed in a treatment group, and teachers and students randomly placed in controlled conditions. And then we compared them. And what's critical is that we had pre and post tests of science achievement. But these measures, these post measures that we had, these summative measures weren't anything that we developed, right? We developed the curriculum materials, but to make it a fair comparison, we actually used assessment tasks from the State Department of Michigan, who are an independent source that everybody in the state of Michigan would have to take to see what would happen. We also did observations of teachers to make sure they're really doing the project-based learning. Also of the teachers in the control group to make sure they're focusing on similar learning goals. We did surveys of teachers and students. We also measured the social emotional learning because, as I said, the enjoyment of science, the motivation to do science is really critical. And to get aspects of that as well, we also interviewed teachers. So we, in crafting engaging science environment, we created 3 units in physics and we created 3 units in chemistry. And we worked both in sites in Michigan and sites in California. And in Michigan, we worked with throughout the state. We worked both on the east side of the state, the west side of the state, central Michigan, where I'm from, and also the northern part of the state as well. In California, we worked in LA public schools, as well as south of San Diego in schools that sort of are very close to the Mexican border. We had a total of 61 schools, 119 teachers, and 6,211 students. And as I said, we randomly placed these groups, these teachers, into different groups, right? We put our hands in one group. We said, okay, this is a treatment group. We stuck our hands into the bag again and said, okay, where is this group going to go? But we looked first to see if they were comparable. So if I picked my treatment group and I said it had this kind of characteristics, and I picked the control teacher, they have to have matched comparison. So this was a matched randomized control sample, which gives it a much more powerful impact. What did we learn? Well, we got an effect size of 0.21. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that it was a 7% increase. And to translate that means that if someone got a B, that would move them to an A minus. If they got a C minus, it moves them up to the B range. So it's a substantial increase in student performance. And what's critical, once again, about this is that this was on a test. The summative test was done, was from a group that we had nothing to do with the development. It was an independently developed summative test. Some of our further analysis went to work. Some of our further analysis was able to show that what was the factor that was really pushing at kids doing this learning. And it had to do with kids actually constructing models. So in a lot of our work, we actually had kids in the treatment group and the project-based learning groups actually construct models to help them make sense of what's going on. And that seemed to be a fairly good path in getting them to reach these outcomes. So what are some of the major takeaways? So as you can see, students certainly improved their learning on challenging science ideas and practices. What's critical is that it works for all genders, males and females in the treatment group, both outperformed males and females in the control group. It worked for all races. Everybody in the treatment group, no matter what race you're from or ethnicity you're from, outperformed the people in the control group, which is a substantial finding. So if we really want to get kids to really understand challenging science concepts, getting them engaged in project-based learning is critical. But again, it's not only the materials in which kids are engaged in doing stuff and doing the science is critical. But going along with that has to be intense professional development, because these are different ways of teaching. And you have to have really good knowledge and use formative and end of the unit assessments and a summative test as well. So I want to thank you. There's my email. If you don't have it, there's going to be questions after the next speaker. And I also am on Twitter, and to some of the people that funded us, both the National Science Foundation. If I had time, I was going to talk about my elementary program, but I'm out of time, so I'm not going to talk about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. I will say that we will have Joe's resources as well as our next speaker, Kristen Wobie's resources, as well as some of you have shared some resources with us. We are going to have all of those available on our website. So if you are interested in the elementary study, there will be information there for you. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Kristen Wobie. She's the director of WPI Center for Project-Based Learning. Prior positions include the director of the Great Problem Seminar Program, WPI's First Year Projects Program, Associate Dean for Undergraduate Studies, Metzger Chair and Head of the Chemistry and Biochemistry Department. She started at WPI in 1995. Her teaching awards include the Morezzi Prize for Innovation in Undergraduate Education, and she is a co-recipient of the 2016 Bernard M. Gordon Prize for Innovation in Engineering and Technology Education, awarded by the National Academy of Engineering. She received her BA in Chemistry from St. Olaf College and her PhD in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology from Harvard University. She is co-editor of Project-Based Learning in the First Year. Recent publications appear in Change, the magazine of higher learning and diversity and democracy. So please join me at this point in welcoming Kristen Wobie.
Thank you, Erica, for that introduction. And I too am going to move to sharing my screen, and I'm going to tell you a little story that Erica wanted me to talk to you about. I'm having issues here about how we know that employers value project-based learning. And so I'm going to start with a little bit of history. What you can see here on the slide is actually the first two buildings that were built on the WPI campus, which is right here in the heart of Worcester. The beautiful stone one in the front is Boynton Hall, and that was the first classroom building where students focused really on learning theory. The red brick one to the right and behind is Washburn Shops. And as this name implies, the students would go from learning their theory in Boynton Hall over to the shops in Washburn and put the theory into practice. And so we've had over 150 years of, and our campus, our school motto is theory and practice, sort of loosely translated from the German. So we have this long tradition of theory and practice on our campus. But by the 1970s, we, as a STEM school and primarily an engineering school, had a very rigid curriculum. And at that point, a very courageous group of faculty and administrators completely revised our entire curriculum with a vote of the faculty that passed by the narrowest of margins. And what you see on this slide is a very dramatic rendering of our curriculum into some kind of weird art form. So the curriculum as a whole is the big giant gray and red circle, campus colors. And you can see on the left-hand side that it's divided into the traditional 4-year undergraduate curriculum, with year 1 being at the bottom. Now, what that big revamp of our curriculum was, we threw out the whole thing and started building the curriculum by putting projects in first. So in the last year of an undergraduate's progress through our curriculum, they have to complete as 1/4 of the entire year's effort a project in their major, called creatively the major qualifying project. It's qualifying because you have to pass it to graduate. So it's 1/4 of the work that the students do, and this provides an opportunity for students to synthesize and demonstrate that they have a thorough understanding of the material they've learned in their major up to that point, and they're ready to go on to the next step. Not so unusual. Many schools have a senior thesis kind of thing. I think where WPI is a little different is that we require all of our students to do that. A little more unique is in the 3rd year, there is another major project also required for graduation, also 1/4 of the entire junior year. And this project is fairly unique in that it asks students to really take on a project that examines the intersection of science, society, and technology. The engineering faculty, many of whom had come from business, wanted to make sure students understood from the beginning, or at least from this point going forward, that the decisions that they would make as engineers, as scientists, as whatever it was they went on to become, that those decisions would affect real people in real places. And in fact, that the societies that they had grown up in were going to inform the decisions they made. So that interaction between science and society and technology is a two-way street. It influences us, what we do influences it. Similarly, in the 2nd year, a lot of students are completing the capstone for what's the equivalent of a minor in humanities and arts. So all students have to take a set of courses in the humanities and arts and finish that off with a project that's typically done somewhere in year 2 or maybe year 3. And most recently, we added opportunities for students to participate in projects in the 1st year through the Great Problems seminars, which is sort of a small variety of that interactive qualifying project and is not nearly as weighty in terms of the amount of credit. And once we put those projects in as the core of what we wanted our students to be able to do, we had to build classes into the curriculum to make sure that students had both the core knowledge, as Joe said, core knowledge is still really important to support the learning and the actions that the students would have in the projects. But since we instituted these big projects, these little chickenpox-like things, the small circles, are there to indicate that projects have crept into courses as well, to the point where we did a survey not so long ago, and 85% of the faculty said that they had inserted projects within courses. So we've been going along with our project-based curriculum for going on 40 years when we decided that we bragged a lot about it and we recruited students based on the opportunity to participate in these projects. And this junior year one, in case you don't know, we send about 1,000 students off campus to work with communities every year doing this interactive qualifying project. And some of them get to go to really cool places like Venice or Copenhagen or Namibia or Bangkok or Costa Rica or Paraguay. And doesn't that sound cool? So we brag on it. And when the curriculum was developed, we believed with all our heart and soul that this was going to be better preparation for scientists and engineers going into the workplace. Well, after 40 years being scientists and engineers, we decided it was time to collect some data. So we undertook a survey of both our alumni and employers of our alumni. And I give you some of the boring details. We offered the survey to all of our graduates from 1974 through 2011, and we interviewed non-alumni employers of our graduates. The survey that the alumni got asked about a raft of professional skills and abilities, worldviews, and personal impacts. And the employers were interviewed with semi-structured, in-depth interviews. And what we found from this, and I'm going to focus first on the employer stuff, since that's particularly was what I was asked to do. We found that the employers reinforced the what is it called when they tell you a story, that the students were telling us that these were transformational. So employers who knew that we had a project-based curriculum actually came right out and said during the interview that the project-based learning was responsible for creating individuals well prepared to work in the workplace. And when asked to describe more what they thought was important about the projects, they really thought that projects that took time, that they weren't really short projects, but long-term projects that involved something important were more valuable than short, trivial projects. And that substantiveness, particularly if it's involving working with industry, focusing on problems that are real, authentic problems, and not just an exercise that the 7 classes who took this in the prior 7 years have all done and gotten better or worse data, that real problems were much better. And having students have the opportunity to be self-directed, to lead the project themselves, or direct maybe some of where it goes, that really helped. And I'll share a couple of quotes from the surveys, and these are employer voices. When they're doing those project-based courses with teams, and I didn't mention that, but a lot of these projects, almost all of these projects are done in teams of say 3 to 5. They end up being able to communicate and to articulate their point of view and what they think is appropriate, having to work through all the compromises, all of that. I think as a result of that type of classwork and preparation, they're better prepared to enter the workforce, I think is what should have followed that. Another quote from a different employer: the projects are always discussed at our interviews, and we kind of delve deeper into what the students' experiences were, what kinds of problems they've had, how their troubleshooting was, how was their team dynamics, were they the leader, the background, how did they work out any problems? So we get very, very concrete examples of the key things that employers are looking for. In summary, strong domain knowledge is a must. As Joe said, you have to have the core stuff, but it's easy to find graduates, say of a chemical engineering program, who know a lot about chemical engineering. But what sets students who've got project-based learning apart are the added, what you were talking about, Erica, is the soft skills, which are not actually soft, they're hard and they require practice, but we don't usually have courses on these. And so being able to have students graduate with not only their domain knowledge, but real skills and abilities in communication, teamwork, taking initiative, being self-directed, leading a team are really important. And the employers can see from resumes that if there is this kind of project work, It's a proxy for having been able to develop those kinds of skills that the employers are really looking for. And so many of our employers claim that graduates of a project-based curriculum require less training, they're more day one ready, and are more likely to advance. And I've had, when we have career fairs on campus, and sometimes we invite the representatives of the various companies to come to lunches, and I've sat with some of them. And I've had many of them say that they just love our graduates, more even say our big 3-letter competitor to the east in Boston, because the students come in far more accustomed to knowing how to operate in a more business-like setting. And this is probably not a surprise to any of you, but surveys of employers of college students, and I'm sure this is true also of high school students, they're really looking for a lot of these soft skills, ability to communicate both orally and writing, being able to make ethical judgments and have good decision-making, critical thinking, applying their knowledge and skills to real-world settings, working with others. And in surveys, 91% of employers say that these things are more important than domain knowledge. You can learn a lot. And as was pointed out, in a day and age that things are changing so quickly, I think it was Joe that pointed this out, people are going to have to continue to learn in the workplace. So the learning, they develop learning skills through their education, and having these to be able to add to that are really important. So I'm going to close by telling you some of what we learned from our alumni. So the employers are all about project-based learning, but our alumni also felt that because of the projects program, and now this is not the same kind of scientific work that Joe was presenting, because these are self-reported data. So, we're all fans of ourselves, or most of us anyway. But the alumni reported that because of their project work at WPI, more than 50% responded favorably to that projects were responsible for this list of things. So you would expect that managing a project, you get better at by managing a project, of course, but taking responsibility for one's own learning is, clearly key in this day and age. Being able to communicate, being able to function effectively on a team, no matter what you do in life, effective functioning on a team is really important. So they talked a lot about professional impacts. And when we started this study, these were the things we intended to ask about, but we did a little pre-work in an ideation exercise with some alumni asking about the impacts of project work. And many of them talked about positive consequences on their personal lives. And so we included those in the survey as well. And here are a few of the things that, over 50% of the alumni responded positively, that working in projects while they were at WPI helped them with all of these things. So how interesting that working on projects helped the students feel like they achieved a better work-life balance, or a stronger personal character, or an enriched personal life. So on balance, we're pretty happy with the decision that WPI made 50 years ago to transition to a project-based curriculum. And I would encourage all of you to think about how you can use project-based learning in your own classrooms. And Joe's got some great reference materials, it sounds like. WPI also has a STEM education center where they'll work with K-12 educators on developing project-based curriculum for you in your setting as well. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Erica.
You're muted, Erica. Erica, you're on mute.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Joe and Chris. As I look at the chat, I don't see any questions at the moment. So both Joe and Chris will be at a different roundtable sessions later. So you may be fortunate enough to be in a small group setting with them. So we will just go ahead and move forward then to our next point of business. And it's another gift of appreciation. Thank you to Joe Vatisse. He's the consumer leading supervisor at Unibank. Thank you, Joe, for sharing your financial literacy knowledge with both our students and educators on numerous occasions over the years, which will ultimately help strengthen the fiscal health of the Blackstone Valley. So thank you, Joe. So, Joe and Chris helped us learn a little bit more about what project-based learning is, how does it benefit, people in the education world, people in the business world. We had some self-reporting data. We had hardcore data from studies. Now let's take a local project-based learning experience and hear from, students, teachers, and employers that participated. We have with us today students and teachers from Uxbridge High School, as well as representatives from Lenza Americas. So from here, I would like to go ahead and welcome our students first. Jeremy Oakenquist and Joe Costa. They're both seniors at Uxbridge High School, and they both plan to attend Western New England University studying engineering in the fall. So Jeremy and Joe, we know that well over a year ago, you both were involved with a project with Lenza Americas. Can you share with us a little bit about this experience and what you were challenged to do? More specifically, Jeremy, maybe you can talk about the project from the very beginning and how you learned about it. And then Joe, maybe you can kind of take over from there and share with us, COVID happened in between this somewhere. So then once COVID happened and we regrouped, maybe Joe, you can share with us how we put closure on the experience.
In December 2019, we got an email from our teacher, and it was asking us if we wanted to work on a project from Lenza, designing a salesman's case for a new prototype that Lenza was making. The project involved working with many other people, including Floyd from Lenza. He gave us all the information from the company. Then after that, we made all the CAD files for the project. And after that, we started contacting different companies such as Pelican and a screwdriver provided for the box, for one of the parts for the box. And we also worked with a couple other departments from our own school to make a presentation and renderings for the project to demonstrate what we've made so far in our project for Lenza.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. Do you want to talk to, or Joe, do you want to talk to the slide that we have, which actually kind of goes back to one of the things that Joe had mentioned, the tangible artifacts and the importance of that. This slide kind of shows the case that you designed and then the case that Lenza actually ended up using. Either Jeremy or Joe.
Yeah, so after COVID-19 happened, we ended up got reintroduced through the Blackstone Valley Education Foundation and Lenza back to the project. Recently, we had just come back to school full time, and we were given an opportunity to close the whole project. So we ended up making a presentation, like Jeremy said, with we ended up working with the graphic design program within Uxbridge High School, and they helped us make a presentation giving us closure with the company. Lenza and us, we did a mock Shark Tank discussing our pitch, and we made a mock pitch to Lenza in order to make a closure on the whole process. It was very good. We built a relationship with the business, and we had fun.
Great, thank you, Joe. Yes, Shark Tank was a lot of fun. It's one of my more favorite shows to watch, and so being able to be the person to introduce the sharks and play that role was a bit of fun. And I know that both of you boys had a good time as well. So thank you. I think at this time, I'd like to add to the panel Craig Dahlquist. Craig is the Senior Technical Training Engineer at Lenza Americas. Craig, how has Lenza benefited from supporting students in this project-based learning experience?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you to Joe and Jeremy. You really did a good job for us. One of the things you mentioned in the practice round yesterday that kind of resonated with me was when you had stated that you had taken things, knowledge that you had from a bunch of your other classes, and you were able to apply these other class knowledge to put into this project. And to me, that really amplifies the fact that you know the ability to apply the knowledge that you've learned. In this design, we had been given this task to design this. There was a comparable one from our German counterpart. And one thing I wanted to point out was these blue modules that are sort of in the middle there. And in the original German design, they were basically at right angles, and they were tucked away where you couldn't see them. And one of the things that the students had come out with, and that we kept in this design, was the fact of having these face up, and it really made a difference, I think, in the fact that it looks a lot nicer. It really a nicer look. So I think one of the first benefits I think we had, we took an idea from their design and implemented that we may or probably wouldn't have have gotten. A lot of times what happened is we would have also had to so that's one of the big takeaways. We're able to use their ideas to help us design a nicer case. The other point I'd like to make is, why we did this. One reason to do this is, a lot of times you have different small projects, and these are projects that other engineers would normally do. However, they're not that technical, but they do take time. And in our business, and I think a lot of businesses, especially with engineering time is very valuable. And to be able to say outsource some of this time that we would have taken one of our employed engineers to do, it really gave us that benefit, to actually get more done, get something accomplished, and to have the students work on this. Another advantage, I think too, is the ability to get to know some of our local high school students that are going on to engineering degrees. Reason being, we usually have summer internships, and we've also do co-ops. And from both these pools, we've actually do direct hires. So, especially in the summer internships, when they've been a couple more years into their studies, we have a little more complicated projects that we have our summer interns do. And this gives us even a better way of working with the students and getting to know them so that we can add them and possibly hire them in the future.
Great, thank you so much, Craig. We'd like to bring up to the panel, kind of different in a Zoom setting, I know, but Mike Smutok is the technology teacher at Uxbridge High School. Mike, what was your whole role with this project as the teacher?
I get to play a coach instead of a teacher. So rather than having a set curriculum that I have to teach to, or an MCAS test or something like this, I get to facilitate these students working on this project. I essentially did a lot of logistical planning with them, because there is a difference between the business world and the world of high school education. Like the timing is a little bit different. We leave at 2 o'clock. Some of our classes rotate, they drop one day, things like that. I dealt with IT a lot because the students were trying to send as minuscule as this issue sounds, I mean, it's a big deal. You can't do the project if the students can't send an email to an outside organization. So all the correspondence went through me, which most people would say, oh, that's terrible. But I got to teach them soft, hard skills, how to write a professional email, how to write an email to a company and ask them for something. And, you know, so it's more than just building a physical prototype or going through the design process. It's all these little tiny things that we got to work with them on during the course of this project. A couple other things, this supplemented our curriculum. It enhanced it a little bit. So you can either take project-based learning examples from businesses and other departments in your school and whatnot, and you can use it to enhance your curriculum. So these students actually were a little bit further ahead in their regular studies. And I said, hey, like, who wants a challenge? And three gentlemen raised their hand. So you can do that. You can totally replace, for example, there's a unit I teach in a different class where it's a reverse engineering unit. I would have taken this case design and used it as the entire unit. So I would have just swapped them out, switched them out. One of the reasons I'm allowed to do that is because I get really, really good support from our administration at our building. The principal, the assistant principal, guidance. Everybody's kind of on board with what we're doing, helping with working with the businesses, working with the Ed Foundation. So it's really allows it to become a successful partnership that we have with everyone. And as we can see with COVID-19, this project sort of took place in person and it sort of took place virtually. Don't let, oh, we can't get together. Our schedules don't match up. Everybody's now a Zoom expert because we've been doing Zoom for over a year. Get your kids on Zooms with these people and these businesses and have that, build that relationship there, you know, using this virtual tool. We were actually able to use the virtual tool and add in another department. We have a graphic arts department, which is just getting, you know, these students are a lot younger. They're just getting started along their path. And we were able to incorporate them into the closure portion of this. And that took place entirely virtually. So two 14 or 15-year-old students that have never been exposed to this project now get this really, really incredible experience that's possible because of the virtual world. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that was involved in this. And it was a really, really great experience for my students and other students in the department. And I hope we can work with some of you again.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. The applications engineer at Lenza Americas, Rebecca Jung, is also here with us. And we want to hear from you, Rebecca, a little bit about how project-based learning is important in training the students for the future from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. I mean, like we keep mentioning this again, project-based learning will allow students to gain job readiness, to be used in everyday work when they enter the career or even their, you know, college. Like Joe and Chris already mentioned this many times, so I guess I'll just reiterate it in a different way. I guess I know high school is a long time for a lot of us already. So how about I ask, like, how many of you have ever attended training or read something or learn something, but because you never actually implement it or do something with that knowledge, you forget that knowledge, you know, then it just becomes useless, right? And that's what project based learning is allowing students to do, to be able to apply the knowledge they learn in classrooms to something that they can, you know, do outside of the classroom. And, you know, I like that Mr. Smutok brought up like the question thing. It's not only about how to, let's say, like ask a question in an email, but building the confidence for kids to be able to ask these questions as well. And not, you know, if you have kids who are afraid to ask questions, they're going to become adults who are afraid to ask questions. We see that in the industry, and that's not great either, right? So project-based learning builds that confidence for students. From a, you know, physical benefit standpoint, these things they can also put in their resumes, right? Is an experience that they can actually talk about in an interview for either, you know, future jobs or college applications. They also get to interact with, someone who are older than them, who can become mentors for them. They get to interact with employees in various roles, not just engineering. They're going to engineering school, but they're clearly talking to Lisa, they're talking to the marketing department, they're talking to design. And that's kind of how it is in the real world too. Just because I'm an engineer does not mean that I just go into the dungeon and do my engineering thing. I talk to so many departments at Lenza and we all work together. And last but not least, they get actual feedback from experts in the field to continually grow themselves. And I think all of these are really great things that students get from project-based learning.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So we're learning all these puzzle pieces are starting to get put together, right? Like what is PBL, who can benefit, why, how. Jeremy and Joe, back to you. One last question for you. How have each of you you've done this now, you participated in this experience. How have you benefited from it and how do you think it will impact your future?
One of the biggest takeaways for me, at least, is learning how to work with multiple groups of people and like how to effectively communicate what needs to be done and like get your work done for that group, and how to use all the work that all the skills you've learned to use it in one thing to combine it into one goal, and how to communicate, like get like Smoothtalk was saying, like the emails, like all that.
Perfect. So again, back to some of those soft skills that Chris Wobie, ever so eloquently stated. They're not so soft. They're actually hard to learn. So yes, those are definitely important. Joe, how about for you?
Pretty much the same for me. I would say that really combining all the skills I've learned throughout all my courses in high school. I've taken woodshop. I had to use woodshop in this project to make the prototype for the box, or the case, I should say. All my engineering classes, I find myself using skills in that in each and every class that typically I wouldn't find myself using in combination with each other during school, which is really cool, I think. Even the communication too. Talking to the graphic design team, talking to people at Lenza, all those different skills that I had to learn really made an impact on me. And I think that'll help me in my career going in the future, and even in college too, having to talk to professors, potentially having projects. Who knows what the path I'm going to go down later in life is. And I feel like this project really gave me a head start on learning that for my career.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. I'm sure that this experience will certainly stay with both of you in years to come for sure. And thank you for leaving your track meet early this afternoon. I hope you were at least able to throw the javelin prior to joining us. Thank you for making this a priority. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Last on our panel, I would like to introduce Joe Barrows. Joe is also the digital media teacher at Uxbridge High School. Joe is the teacher of Samantha and Mason, who were the freshmen that Mike Smoothtalk was talking about. Unfortunately, they were unable to join us today. But Joe, can you kind of, very succinctly kind of share for us, how you think this experience as freshmen, as underclassmen, can truly impact, and positively impact these students as well?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you guys so much for having me. This has been such an incredible opportunity for Sam and Mason, as well as myself. I think that the great thing about partnerships like this is that for a lot of students, this kind of opportunity is that motivation that they need to continue doing the work that they're doing in a program like graphic design or digital media or any of our other programs here. When there are opportunities that come along where students can sit down with an actual industry professional and talk about the work that they've created, the students feel validated, they feel proud, and most importantly, for a lot of them, they feel motivated to continue making the great work they're making. For students who are coming up on the other side of the coin through the levels of digital media, whether that's graphic design or photography or video production, this also adds something that the students can shoot for. They look at someone like Sam or someone like Mason or even Joe or Jeremy, and they can say, I want to do that. And I think that culture within the classroom is incredibly invaluable. So unfortunately, Mason and Sam couldn't be here. They had some prior engagements this afternoon. But what I did was earlier this week, I talked to them a bit about their experience with this opportunity and what they would like to do if an opportunity like this were to ever be available to them again. And I got a couple of statements here from them. So Sam explained to me that an opportunity like this was really awesome to have because it gave her some freedom to create something that wasn't part of just a class. They got to work on this outside of school and had to work with other people to get it done. And if she had the chance to do something like this again, she'd like it to be another presentation because she really enjoyed the presentation aspect. And she'd like to be able to talk to another professional and get more feedback. She felt like that was really, really important. Mason also agreed and stated participating in a project was amazing, and he really, really enjoyed the entire experience. He said it was great to have an opportunity where he worked with another student, because again, sometimes that doesn't happen, especially in the world of COVID, where we kind of have to stay a little bit far apart. And he hopes to do something like this very, very soon. He also stated that he wanted to do something in the digital media field again, something like graphic design related or video production. So they were both super, super excited and hope that they can do something hopefully very, very soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. And thank you for everybody from Lenza and Uxbridge who joined us as panelists today to just kind of give us that example of how project-based learning truly can be successful and beneficial no matter, what your role is in it. So at this time, I really do want to get to our roundtable discussions. I did see there was one quick question, Holly, is that correct, in the chat? I believe it would be a question for you, Mike Smutak. So Holly, go ahead. Did you want to share the question?
Yep, the question is from Fran Thomas, who is the principal at Bartlett High School. She would like to know, is Lenza an official innovation pathway partner for Uxbridge High's advanced manufacturing pathway?
I believe so. I think they are. There's several businesses, I believe, that are partnered with us, including the Blackstone Valley Education Foundation, and I believe Lenza, I believe Lampen is partnered with us as well. And I would check with Mr. Mike Rubin, the principal, and just to double check this before I go ahead and say like, yeah, great. We've been working with them in the past, with Lenza in the past. Right before COVID happened, we were trying to get a group of our students over to take a tour of their facility. And again, that's another one of those, it doesn't have to necessarily be a project, a simple tour, an explanation of what goes on there. It can be very motivating, validating, and it's just a wonderful experience for the students. So again, that was pre-COVID. Now we can't pile like 15 kids on a bus and then walk around your facilities or your businesses. But hopefully in the fall, when this COVID settles down a little bit, we'll be able to get back and do that again.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Holly. Yes, we will definitely return to some of the in-person experiences for our students and our teachers for sure. So at this point, I do want to be able to give you an opportunity to spend the rest of our time together in our virtual roundtables. I want to remind you that this is a unique group of people, right? I mean, we have teachers, we have a couple of students, we have CEOs, business leaders, organization representatives, and your perspective is truly valuable. I'm going to share with you a couple of guiding questions in a moment. It's question number 2 in each breakout room will also have a point person or a facilitator to kind of take notes and share highlights that your group discusses to get back with us. Again, if you have any resources that you want the larger group here to be able to utilize, feel free to throw those in the chat or email either Holly or Jocelyn and I directly. But I will, before we get into our breakout sessions, I do want to go ahead and recognize our final 2 individuals for this afternoon. First is we have Matt Popenick. Matt is the Principal Program Manager at Dell Technologies. He's also a BVEF board member. And in his roles, both at BVEF and at Dell, Matt is actively involved in many of our student programs. So thank you, Matt, And also Greg Myers, the superintendent of Millbury Public Schools. Greg, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with BVEF surrounding NEASC, which will enable us to provide support for our member school districts through the accreditation process. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and you are an educator, I encourage you to visit our website or send me an email, because we definitely can support this process for you when it's your turn. So here are the three guiding questions. Don't feel like you have to answer all these questions. They're there if you'd like. I'd really like you to use this time to kind of network with each other. But like I said, the answer to number 2 will help guide our programming for the upcoming year. So any thoughts that you have would be greatly appreciated. So we're going to take majority of the remainder of this time to go into breakouts. We will reconvene one more time at the end for about 2 minutes to close all together. But at this time, Jocelyn, if you want to invite everybody to a virtual round table, that would be great.